Good morning. Morning and welcome to the Rector's Forum, which is not in the forum, which is in the church. And thank you for either finding your way here by staying where you are or finding your way here any other way. My name is Mike Kinman. I'm the rector here. My pronouns are he, him. If you are new at All Saints or are visiting with us here this morning, it's great to have you here. We'd love to find out who you are. There is a welcome tent outside that's got lots of great information about this congregation. You can also meet some wonderful people on the lawn who can share with you about who we are as All Saints Church. I encourage you to do that. I want to welcome everyone who is streaming. You can turn and wave to the camera, everybody, from around the country and around the world. It's great to have you as part of the wider All Saints community. And it's your gifts, it's the gifts of everyone in so many ways that support this community. The gifts of your time, the gifts of your skills and abilities, and the gifts of your money. For those of you who are streaming, there's a big donate button that's right below, like right about here, and you can just hit that, and it'll take you to a place where you can make a pledge or make a one-time gift to All Saints Church. And everyone here, thank you so much for your generosity, which keeps this community going. And there's always time if you haven't made your pledge to All Saints Church for 2019. We're not even halfway through the year yet. You can do that, and you can see me or Terry Knowles or someone else for a pledge card. And if you ever have something happen in your life you just want to make a gift for Thanksgiving about, that's wonderful. Please do that. And then you're going to be also hearing more and more about our Legacy Society and the Legacy Wall that is going to be coming up in a really beautiful new way in the next coming months. I'm really thrilled to welcome to the forum and to All Saints Church. Can I call you Mako? Mako Fujimura. And I'll read you a little bit of his bio. His bio is very, very long, and I could spend here the whole time telling you about him, which would be no fun for anyone. He is a leading contemporary artist whose process-driven, refractive, slow art has been described by David Brooks of the New York Times as, I love this quote, a small rebellion against the quickening of time. Robert Kushner in the mid-90s, written on Fujimura's art and art in America this way: the idea of forging a new kind of art about hope, healing, redemption, refuge, while maintaining a visual sophistication and intellectual integrity is a growing movement, one which finds Makoto Fujimura's work at the vanguard. He is an arts advocate, a writer and speaker. He currently divides his time between his studio in Princeton, New Jersey, and his Pasadena studio, which is just around the corner here, and serves as the director of Culture Care Initiative at Fuller Theological Seminary. And you and I met when you came to the 7:30 service, and you invited me into your studio a couple different times, once for a beautiful tea ceremony. And as we talked and you began to share your work, I've just been captivated by it and by the way that you merge yourself as an artist, yourself as a theologian, and yourself as someone who has lived, as we all have, in a life that has many changes and chances and joys and traumas, and how all of those things have merged together, and how when we put those things together, art becomes a living, evolving, piece of us, of all of us. And so I just want to say it is a joy to have you here at the Rector's Forum, and it's a joy to have you in Pasadena. And so I want to introduce Mako, but he wants us to play a short video first to introduce him, and then, but can we just welcome, first of all, Mako Fujimura.
As I mix these pigments and as I meditate on the Psalms read you. You're not reading it, and you're not trying to understand it through information. The Psalms open up a way for us to somatically engage in the world, move into the unknown. and the Psalms help us in that journey into the unknown, into the mystery of God. Journey perhaps of death and martyrdom and betrayals and brokenness. Journey that literally as these oyster shell and other pigments are pulverized. And they have to be pulverized to create beauty. And I think about that as I mix these pigments, that the sacredness of the materiality that is different from sitting in a classroom and taking notes and learning, and as important as that is, that fails the limits of that is that you really don't know until you make. And so, do I know these materials? Well, we'll see. And every time I fail, which is often, I find that I didn't know, or maybe love, enough. That my hands tell me every time. I mean, today is pretty moist because it's been raining, but it's drying because the sun just came out, and that lift of the moisture I can feel in this oyster shell bowl. And so I was a little confused because I expected to hold moisture a little bit longer, and you noticed me adding more water because I didn't anticipate it to lift, so I prepared the glue in a certain way, a little stronger than usual because it is moist, and it kind of backfired on me. So I had to adjust, and it's a constant reading, and my hands will tell me that through years of practice of making this. I cannot explain it to you anything other than just try it. God wants us to name this strange and perplexing world, traumatic world, tell our stories, and not be victimized by the circumstances or be swaddled up in the traumas of our days, but to co-create into the future of this not only redemptive journey, but toward new creation.
Thank you. And thank you for welcoming me to be in this conversation with you this morning. I really want it to be a conversation, so I will open up space for that, for Q&A as much as we can. And thank you, Rector Kimman, for inviting me. I do go back and forth between Princeton and Pasadena. The saving grace is that I get both churches are named All Saints. So same liturgy, so I don't feel like I am alienated from this rhythm of worship. And in Princeton All Saints, I have done a few works, liturgical works, to be embedded into worship, which is such an important privilege as a visual artist. And as a visual artist, you often feel isolated from the world, especially in contemporary art, where we have made it so that art itself has become separated from common life. And to think of art as connected with all of who you are, not just your artist side, but as a person, as a father. My daughter is here with me today, who lives in Orange County, so I'm happy to share Father's Day with her. But as a human being, how are we to live in the abundance of God and not to be trapped in the scarcity mode that this world constantly, this barrage of temptations that come our way through every means possible, that we are limited in our resources and we're limited in our humanity, and we have to fight the culture wars in order to win at all costs. And as I was listening to Rector Mike's sermon this morning, I was reminded once again how vulnerability, how when we open up to the world, we are often hit back, and the world doesn't want us to be vulnerable and honest and authentic. And how art can be an antidote to that. Art, music, I'm speaking in broader terms of the arts, theater, dance, anything you create. In fact, I know that if I asked you to raise your hands and say, how many of you artists, maybe I'll do that, how many of you artists, musicians, practicing? Wow, that's more than I thought. I'm grateful for you, your journey. But if I ask the same question in a kindergarten class, almost all the hands will go up. What happened in third grade? Did somebody tell us that we are not artists, or that you're not good enough, that you don't have that expression as a human being? You don't have to be a professional, but I believe in the Gospels, Jesus reminds us at least of the abundance of creation. And this invitation, as I spoke in this wonderful film resource that Fuller is creating, it's available to you all if you go to Fuller Studio. At least that we are to live in the abundance of God, not to gauge what we do as human beings or to create a future fighting the scarcity model. That's a human creation. And Jesus stood on the hills of Galilee, on the west side of the Sea of Galilee. And I stood there. I was able to stand there 3 times in the last 2 years because I had an exhibit at Tikkun Museum in Israel. And second time I stood, I went with a friend. He is a person who knows Israel well, and he took me to this hill, and he said, most likely this is where Jesus stood when he gave the Sermon on the Mount. And I was standing there, and it was in February, it had just rained. And I noticed all of a sudden these were all these little anemones and lilies of the valley. They call it that in Israel. It's these tiny little fragile flowers that come up in the morning. And they're so spindly that they dry up in the desert heat. But when it rains, all of these things come out, just like in California when we have, after wildflowers and it rains and all these things come up. And then I stood there on the hills of Galilee, and I realized something I never would have understood unless I stood there. That Jesus chose in this desert called Israel one of the most abundant places to remind us that the world seems to be a place of scarcity and a desert. But Jesus came to remind us of something else, that all around you there are these little flowers starting to come up. Literally, you can see them. And there are olive trees, and there's this, on the western side is this abundant hills. Of course, you look across the Sea of Galilee, there's Syria. You can see sometimes the smokes from the bombings. And you're looking across this lake that when the wind picks up, suddenly you feel the waves. And you can see the fishermen, perhaps, if you could imagine Peter and the disciples fishing, that how dangerous sometimes it could be. The wind can come suddenly. But you're standing, and then you realize something. I am a bird watcher. I love birds. And I realized at that moment something that I never thought about, that I've read in other literature, but I didn't think about until I stood there on this hill on the west side of Seal Gallery looking at the Jordan Basin. You know what I realized was that this is one of the most abundant migration paths for birds. This is the most important path of migration for ornithologists to study, because millions of birds fly from Europe to Mozambique every year. And the migration, it was about to start, so I looked up and there were these storks flying over me. And then I remembered, like in so many of the mosaics of that time, when you walk around churches, and even some archaeologists have found these places where these mosaics are embedded, and they're these birds. What are they doing? Well, because this is the greatest passage of birds, the most abundant place. And so when Jesus says, look at the birds of the air, he's not just saying, look at the sparrow. No, he's saying, look at the abundance of God. Millions of storks fly over you if they don't get shot down on the Syrian border by Syrian soldiers who use them for target practice. They still make it, and there are millions of birds go through every year back and forth for so many years before Jesus, and to this day, we get to see this abundance of God. And Jesus is telling us through the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the poor, because the definition of poor in this abundance is flipped. Definition of somebody who is longing for peace, somebody who is longing to be fulfilled in life. Those things are not the same as you are experiencing right now. Now, it is true that as you look over the basin to the right toward Nazareth is a valley called Armageddon Valley. That is in front of you too. This is the reality that Jesus' followers had to live. This is the most contested area because the trade route from south to north, east to west, converges there. So it is the most contested land. Literally, there are wars fought, and it is predicted that the last war will be fought there. Who knows? But you can see this Darwinian reality in front of us as Jesus is speaking this way, invoking creation and inviting us into new creation, but there is the Armageddon Valley in between. And I, as an artist, can't help but to feel this tension between the two. I know about scarcity as an artist. I have been told so many times by so many people that you cannot be an artist, or you shouldn't be an artist. It's irresponsible. You should do something more practical. Over and over again, right? But so every time I choose to step into the studio to make art, and by the way, my art is not the kind of art that can go into malls and make a lot of money like Thomas Kincaid's art. You know, it's kind of more about this mystery of creation, so it doesn't really market well, right? So I'm intentionally placing myself in this divide between abundance and scarcity, and I'm daring the world to say, how can you do that? How can you even consider being a responsible human being and creating, beauty, but like you live in this Armageddon Valley and you have to fight your way to just survive. You have to protect not only yourself, but your family. How can you live seeking beauty if the world in front of you is chaos, and in fact, it's ground zero? As I was introduced, we were ground zero residents. I can't believe that, because we didn't move into New York City to be ground zero residents. I brought Lydia, who was a little baby at the time, into the heart of New York City because I wanted to be an artist who is present in New York City, so I can minister to other artists. I can be present with them. And then 9/11 happened, and we lived 2 blocks away. The kids were going to PS 234, which is also 2 blocks away from where the tower stood. I didn't know that, but when I stood on the Seal Gallery on the hills, I remember those moments when I felt caught in between what I envisioned, this vision of what I wanted to help plant churches and to help artists regain their sense of humanity, and the reality in front of me, which is this gaping hole. The towers are gone, and the sun is coming in, but you also see this reality of human strife and fear and anxiety creeping in. And I had to realize that, what I call theology of making, what I talk about in the videos, is not an escape from that. It's a way to deal with your trauma straight on. I talk about that in many of my books, that I have chosen to walk right in to ground zero and create there, because there's just no other way to deal with the trauma. And I'm continuing to walk, and as I said, my materials, because the 17th century materials method called Nihonga, Japanese style paintings, require for me to pulverize pigments, oyster shell, and I use gold and platinum as well, but they are pulverized in order for me to use them, layer them in many layers, sometimes 80 to 100 layers before I start to paint. So it's slow art. And as an artist, I hear these voices like, wouldn't it be more efficient if you use some other material? Or maybe, you have a family to feed. What are you doing in the studio painting these images, that are not meant for the market, but meant for your souls? And I hear these voices all the time because people unwillingly speak to an artist in your midst, and we convince ourselves, starts out of 3rd grade, we convince ourselves that, no, we can't seek beauty or even mercy because we don't have time. We're too busy. We have to survive. Yes. That's the condition where Jesus is, capturing in his Sermon on the Mount, and his parables speak to this, that you who are oppressed and persecuted, you who don't see the future as anything but survival, right? If you think times are bad today, think about back then, when people had no rights. They were taken over by dictatorial forces and corruption and things that you can't control. So all you can do is survive, right? in the Armageddon Valley. But Jesus says, no, come with me. Come with me to the hills of abundance. Look at the flowers around you. They do not toil or spin. But even Solomon in its glory days was not even as beautiful. How much more will God care for you today as you face your Armageddon Valley, as you face this world of scarcity and Darwinian competition, and where you have to prove yourself, you have to wear your mask and create your resume. How much more will God care for you in that very place of vulnerability, and how much more God sees you as a masterpiece of beauty that God has already gave you this gift to ponder, to sit with. And how much more if you are an artist type, or musician, or a theater director, who know that every day of your life you fought against the scarcity model, and you have endeavored to create into the world. How much more would you sit under the feet of Jesus and hear this voice tell you that you have it right? You have gotten the peace of heaven, the whisper of heaven inside of your soul. That's why you're driven to create, no matter how many people tell you you can't, or how many people say you should do something more practical. Because you know that your soul matters, and how your creativity is tied into that. You cannot market that. You know that the most important thing in your life, when we are looking back on our deathbeds, thinking about our lives, it's not your resume or how many cars you have in your garage. No, it's those precious conversations that you have with your friend or your lover or your daughter. See, the best things in life cannot be measured by market forces or even in your resumes, what you've done and what you've accomplished. Great. Things that last, things that endure. A voice is coming out of trauma, but into the Galilean hills of Jesus. Things that last, God whispers of a world in which we are no longer just mechanical marketing pieces, but we're fully human, where we can remove our masks, where we can be ourselves, authentic, and we can speak back into the world and say, it's okay. It's okay to be real and free and reveal your true selves. Be an artist that you once were before third grade. And bring your whole selves into a community like this. And let your whole being resonate with other people struggling and broken. Yes, we're all going through. But the blessing is that Jesus calls us to that place, and he reminds us, he constantly reminds us, if you're feeling unworthy, if you're feeling oppressed, if you're feeling persecuted, if you're feeling completely unable to deal with this world as it is in the Armageddon Valley and ground zeros of the world, welcome. Join us in this renegade crusade in a positive sense to create a new movement of people that would rebel against the quickening of time, that would hold peace when the world is warring against another, that will create peace, that will make peace. So we are all peacemakers. We are all artists in that sense. Before I close, I know we're rushed for time, we're in between worship, so I'll cut it a little bit short so we can have questions. I want to kind of talk about my dad because it is Father's Day. And my dad passed away 2.5 years ago, or 2 years ago, really. He was not a Christian, and yet he taught me more about Christ, I think, than any other person. He was a scientist, a renowned scientist. And one of his colleagues met somebody, and he was at Bell Labs, this very prestigious research institution in Murray Hill, New Jersey, and then he ended his career at Ohio State, where he was the head of speech and hearing sciences. And somebody said to him, a friend of a friend, introduced themselves, and I found out his last name was Fujimura. His name is Osamu Fujimura, and she said, "So are you related to Makoto Fujimura, the artist?" and he said that was his proudest moment. I was in my 30s then. I wasn't that well known, and for him to find out that somebody knew, because he loved the fact that I was an artist. I never got the scarcity thing from my parents. That's why I can stand in front of you and to talk about the abundance of God rather than scarcity, because I had an encouraging environment where I could always be myself and be an artist. And my father said, even when I told him that I'm going to try to make it as an artist, this was after college, but he said, well, that's what I wanted to become. So he always saw himself, even though he was a scientist, as an artist. And he in the early 70s, this was a speech and hearing department at Bell Labs, the most prestigious, cutting-edge, pure research facility in the world. And he said to his colleagues that, the way we are analyzing data, which he called segmentalist approach, we will never get a machine that can speak like a human being. And his friends were like incredulous. He said, no, we'll have a machine in 10 years. This is early 70s. 10 years that you will not be able to, distinguish that it's a machine or human, that it's human voice. And here we are in 2019, right? We have the best we have is Siri and Alexa. See, my father was right, because he identified that what we do in the scarcity mindset is reduce data to segmental ways. And we think we can control data that way. We can create machines that way. But we can't reproduce human speech that way. He knew that, and he fought against the system, and in fact, he was a little bit exiled from his colleagues because he kept on insisting. He's very stubborn and doesn't give in. So he said, we really have to start over if we want to create something that is truly human. See, my father taught me that my faith has to do with becoming human. My father taught me that you can't segment data points just to survive in a Darwinian battle or to just make money. My father taught me that if you want to go after truth, you have to start over and over and over again. So in my studio, that's what I do. I try to be honest with myself. It is the only place, I think, where I can be fully human. And to remove my mask, to be vulnerable, to make myself available, to create something as a window to the world. And I'm so glad to be here in this community where I can speak as fully as that sense of humanity invites us to. So, do we have time?
We probably have time for maybe like one question.
Okay, one question. Okay. Yes, thank you.
You have the mic.
Okay. Anybody have a? Okay, we have a question in front here or in the back. We can take two.
Can you come forward as she's coming back, Stuart?
Yeah.
She's coming. Yeah. Go, Brian. You're going to meet in the middle.
It's a great place to meet.
Yeah, I feel this is an important moment because someone told me I have to be here in this.
Oh, okay.
I'm actually co-chairing, we're starting an artist group here in All Saints to match our writers group.
Wonderful.
And it's for artists to get together. And I wanted to see if you had any advice on how to make the most of this group that is just now being formed.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you for this community that cares for artists. And I wrote a book called Culture Care as a way to do that as a culture rather than fight culture wars, which is based in scarcity mindset, live in abundance, right? One advice that I have is, many people ask me, well, we're starting a artist group. And I say, well, actually it's more important that the entire church is an artist group. and so if you're going to create an artist group, don't isolate yourself, into a nice corner. Of course you need that, but let that be a beginning point where you see yourself as emissaries of this abundance to your whole community. Remind people through your work, through your poems and theater production that you put on and jazz vespers, that no, Jesus is inviting us to this new creation, a creation where abundance leads to more abundance. And you can be such an antidote, right, in a world where everybody believes out there that you have to be on your own, you have to be the master of your own destiny, that we have to survive. Right? We have to wear masks so we can be just live this day. No. There's abundance all around us. I mean, all of you, and this gorgeous sanctuary. I don't mind the white Jesus because we can just move forward and create into the future. That's okay. We can really do that together as a community. So that would be my advice: is don't be satisfied with the holy huddle. Move into your congregations as leaders, as people who have been called by Christ to remind people of the abundance of God. So, thank you.
We got to do something about the white Jesus too. And we actually have time for one or two. Did you, Elizabeth? Or Bob, I guess, you each have microphones. And then, there.
The word, as you do over and over again, abundance.
Yes.
Abundance of what? Abundance of what? Is that synonymous with hope and optimism and positive attitude? Or are we talking about something tangible that we can take to the market?
Yeah, totally. The market forces depend on this idea, actually. Even though we've kind of been forced to believe that it's kind of a Darwinian model, I think there's something that is, in order to complete capitalism at its fullest form, you have to believe in that there is abundance somewhere, right? So beauty and mercy creates a paradigmatic shift from this binary mindset that we operate in. And the best entrepreneurs are ones that can take advantage of that and in some ways create abundance that didn't exist before, And so marketing is completely tied in with our understanding of this reality in front of us, the Armageddon Valley, right? But at the same time, you have to believe, that what you're providing is more than just a product, but it gives. So in that sense, the definition of abundance is very much not just the material resources. It's both creative and spiritual resources, and that's what people are longing for. That's how we are wired, I think. Yeah.
Maybe one more, Lynn.
Yeah,
You had
she had a question right here. Yeah.
and then we'll close. That's okay. Let's get you a mic.
Thank you. Could you give us an example of how your art has intersected with liturgy?
Oh, wow. Yeah, so my liturgical paintings at All Saints in Princeton is literally a, 16 painting set that rotates every season. So I go back to exchange. I just exchange it to Pentecost, and it's rather large. So it's designed for kind of communal, and to me, liturgy saves me because I travel so much that I'm so grateful that I get in this rhythm of thinking about seasons, and allows me to have reading room as I go from one place, feeling like a nomad, and yeah, when I'm home, I'm connected to this community that has really embraced my journey as this nomadic human being, but one that can bring back this news from afar, and so there's a role to play for me that is very important, and actually it's part of liturgy to create margins, I think. Because it is so central to worship, but what it does is it actually gives us breathing room. It creates margins where artists feel that they can contribute something. So I'm grateful for that. Yeah. Thank you.
The work of a deacon.
Yes, it is. Art has a diaconate purpose. It brings healing in those in-between places. And I'm talking about music, theater. Every form of art can really serve community that way. So thank you so much.
Good. Thank you to Mako. Thank you.